They tried to erase it, every page, every name, every scream that once echoed between its cruciform walls. Danvers State Hospital wasn't demolished, it was devoured, not by time, not by nature, but by something beneath the floorboards that learned to feed on memory. There are no surviving blueprints of Ward 17, no formal record it ever existed, but there are whispers, buried in the footnotes of psychiatric journals and the ravings of men who never came home. Patients who disappeared weren't discharged, they were unremembered. And if you're still watching this, you're already closer than most to seeing what they weren't supposed to find. I need you to understand something before we continue. This isn't a ghost story, it's a system story. A story about how institutions bury the truth by design, how they build walls not to contain the broken, but to silence the aware. Something lived inside Ward 17, and it wasn't insane, it was listening. Every asylum in 19th century America followed a model, but Danvers was different. Its architect, Nathaniel J. Bradley, claimed he'd received his inspiration in a dream. He said the structure came to him fully formed, symmetrical, surgical, a crucifix of corridors capped by a central rotunda. But that layout wasn't about healing, it was containment, sigils carved in brick, thresholds set to geometric proportions known only to a handful of Freemasons and medieval surgeons. Danvers wasn't built to cure the mad, it was built to hold something ancient, something that had been unearthed and named in a language no longer spoken. The state funded it under the pretense of mental health reform, but the real patrons were silent, untraceable, men with oil fortunes and papal rings. They needed a place to study psychological collapse and a place to harvest it. By the time Ward 17 was sealed, staff had already stopped using their own names. There was a code spoken at shift change, not English, just 3 syllables, always whispered. If you said them too loud, you'd hear knocking under the floorboards, and it always knocked back. The patients weren't chosen at random, they were sourced, handpicked from institutions across the Northeast. All had one thing in common. They spoke about things they couldn't possibly know. Military coordinates, ancient alphabets, descriptions of underground chambers they'd never seen, yet somehow mapped in chilling detail. Ward 17 was their destination, not for treatment, for observation. But something went wrong. Records show a sharp increase in sleepwalking incidents, not just among patients, but staff. Orderlies found standing in corners, unmoving for hours. Nurses humming in tongues they swore they'd never learned. And then the suicides, always ritualistic, always precise. One doctor carved a perfect Fibonacci spiral into his chest before jumping from the rotunda's upper ring. The others were found in the tunnels below, barefoot, eyes burned black like something had looked back at them. And still, no one closed the ward. Because the ward wasn't failing, it was working. It had become a mirror for a deeper experiment. How far a mind could descend before it stopped being human and started transmitting something older. The deeper you went into Ward 17, the less things obeyed time. Clocks ran backwards, voices echoed before they were spoken. One inmate, filed only as Patient 5, drew the same sigil over and over, 3 interlocked spirals surrounding an empty square. The doctors thought it was obsessive schizophrenia, until the same pattern appeared in 4 unrelated case files from other institutions, all dated the exact same day, July 17th, different years, same shape, same day, no explanation. Patient V spoke only once in her final year. She said, "It eats what you forget," and then she bit off her own tongue. Staff started referring to the basement corridor as the hinge, not a hallway, a hinge, because when you opened its door, reality tilted. People would walk in for 5 minutes and come out with 2 days missing from their memory. They stopped sending staff in alone after a night orderly was found kneeling in the chapel, hands skinned, muttering, I saw the name, but he couldn't say what it was. No tongue, gone, bitten clean through, like Patient V. That's when the higher orders got involved. Men in black wool suits with no state credentials. One of them carried a single briefcase, sealed, locked. Another just stared at the walls like they were moving. They didn't speak to the patients, they interrogated the building, and what they recorded was never entered into evidence. The deeper you trace the records, the more names you find scratched out, not redacted, erased, like they were never written. One doctor's file ends mid-sentence, as if the typewriter stopped recognizing the alphabet. But one marginal note survived, handwritten, faint. He remembered the wrong hour. They found his watch melted to his wrist, and the clock tower, it never struck midnight again. Not because it was broken, because they removed the 12th hour entirely, rewired the mechanism to skip from 11:59 to 12:01 every night. Why? Because that minute, the missing hour, was when the veil thinned, when the ward spoke, not in words, in impressions, thoughts not your own, dark urges, paranoia, a sense that you were being observed from inside your own reflection. Inmates began drawing spirals, again and again, and a jagged eye with no pupil. Those who looked at the drawings too long reported nausea, memory gaps, intrusive dreams of hallways that never ended. One nurse collapsed after murmuring, "There's no floor, just skin." She never woke up. Her EEG registered REM patterns consistent with dream activity. For 9 days straight, no food, no water, just dreaming. She died with a smile and blood between her teeth. Her last journal entry? "The name feeds, the name feeds, the name feeds." 3 times, no explanation, just that. But you're starting to see the pattern now, aren't you? Patterns that feed, memories that vanish, a name that eats itself. Danvers was never just a building. It was an incantation in stone. Every hallway a syllable, every threshold a phoneme. Ward 17? That was the mouth, the place where language stopped behaving. Doctors noticed it first, not just forgetfulness, but corruption of speech. Terms they'd never studied would slide into their reports. Whole case files written in alphabets no one recognized. One psychiatrist described hearing words in his head that didn't translate, only hummed, like they were being rehearsed by his brain without consent. When he tried to transcribe them, the ink blistered off the page. They institutionalized him in his own wing. Visitors said he'd stopped blinking, just stared, repeating one word, reversal. And here's where it gets worse. Linguistic experts from Harvard analyzed surviving audio recordings. Patterns emerged, recursive structures, impossibly layered syntax. The language used in Ward 17 wasn't evolving. It was parasitic, infectious by rhythm. Certain phonetic combinations acted like triggers. Just hearing them rearranged how you understood time. One nurse described entire 12-hour shifts passing in what felt like minutes, while others experienced the opposite, trapped in a 60-second loop, unable to finish a single sentence. They called it glossolalia entrapment, but it wasn't madness, it was ritual resonance. The ward didn't speak, it sang, and the building amplified its melody, bricks tuned to madness, windows sealed with copper latticework to hold the pitch. You were never supposed to hear it. You were never supposed to repeat it, but now you know it's real. You can feel it, can't you? The syntax behind the silence, the hum beneath your memory. Before we go further, I need you to do something. Comment the phrase, "The name eats the name" twice. Exactly like that. It's not a gimmick, it's an initiation, a way to prove you're still inside your body. Before we go deeper into the part they could never erase, it was never just a ward. Ward 17 was a containment schema, not for people, but for an idea. One so volatile that even thinking about it too clearly was enough to change you. That's why no blueprints remain, why the original staff signed lifetime NDAs with clauses written in Latin. Because the architecture wasn't designed to house the insane. It was designed to replicate the very structure of the mind, and then fracture it from the inside. The rotunda was a symbolic crown, each hallway a filament, each chamber a nerve ending. Ward 17 wasn't a hospital, it was a neurological model scaled up, and they fed it thoughts, paranoid ones, broken ones, traumatized ones. Because trauma isn't just pain, it's a binding agent. It turns memory into ritual. And the more trauma they pumped into the system, the more responsive it became. The ward began anticipating behavior, doors that locked before someone reached them, lights that flickered only when someone tried to lie. It was watching them, but not like a camera watches, more like a dream remembers. Then something shifted. One patient, subject 17.17, he began speaking backwards in perfect Aramaic, no training, no exposure. Just woke up one morning and began chanting names. One of them matched a term found only once in Sumerian tablets, catalogued by the British Museum and never translated publicly. He said it was the original name of forgetting, a sound that, once heard, removed your oldest memory forever. They called it the first silence. He only said it once. 3 staff lost all language function. One had to relearn the alphabet from scratch. Another never spoke again. And that's when the ward was shut. Not because it failed, but because it opened. What you need to understand is this. Ward 17 was the test chamber, but the real project is happening now. Digitally, virally, through media, through stories like this. And every second you keep watching, you're becoming part of it. You're not just hearing the tale, you're helping complete the ritual. Every thought you form about it reshapes its structure. Every fear, every doubt, every chill you feel. That's the system syncing with your cognition. There's a reason it's called Ward 17, because you were meant to be inside it all along. Ask yourself, what is a name? Not just a label, but a lock. A gate of syllables designed to hold meaning in place. Now imagine a name designed to unlock. A sound that doesn't describe, but consumes. That was the true purpose of Ward 17, not to treat illness, but to extract cognition, to isolate the pieces of thought that don't belong to us, and follow them back to their source. One file, sealed under Vatican security protocols, mentions a phrase uttered by 3 patients during unconnected